Welcome to Shrink, a psych view on the films with Dr. Colleen Mullen and Courtney Calkins, bringing lessons learned from the big screen into our own lives.
Well, I'm Courtney Calkins, and I'm here with Colleen. Come on in, Colleen. Welcome.
Hi, Courtney. How are you today?
I'm doing great. I think we gave ourselves a very, very difficult movie to pull out the pieces, but there's some real interesting pieces in this one. So it's always good to be together with you because you make me think a little bit deeper and use the movies to do it.
Yeah, and I have a lot of fun doing this with you. And so today we're going to talk about The Martian with Matt Damon. And now that is a movie, and it was tough, not because it was not a good movie, like we both like the movie, but it's a very visual movie.
Yeah.
So what we decided to do was pull out themes from the movie, and we're gonna do as we do in this show. We're gonna show some or listen to some clips, and then we're gonna talk about themes that came up out of those clips.
Yeah, because I don't plan on being stuck on Mars ever. Probably not. But there are so many different themes. I mean, we got even just like problem solving. That to me was the biggest one of the whole movie.
Yes.
Then, we have depression and, of course, isolation. How do people survive in isolation?
Right. And then on the positive end of things, there's the power of positive thinking, and there's resilience. And then we're going to talk about why you should or shouldn't keep secrets from others. So there's a lot of themes that came out of this movie with not a heck of a lot of dialogue that pertains to psychology.
Right. But
Pull
a lot
the
of
themes out of it.
Yeah, so we didn't have much to work with. We could do a lot of space, air, sound, explosions, but that doesn't really propel us.
Right.
So
Lots of explosions.
Yeah, Affleck did a great job in this movie. There's not a lot of individual actors who could carry it.
Well, it was Matt Damon, so it's a good thing that Affleck did a good job because, he looked a lot like Matt Damon.
Well, they could do a lot with that helmet on.
Maybe it's like dogs, how they start to look like their owners. Maybe best buds start to look like each other.
Yeah, see, and that's why I got them mixed up. So
sorry, Matt.
Save me. I say we got to set up the movie. Mark Watney is left on Mars, and here's the press conference they have with the people telling what happened.
At around 4:30 a.m. Central Standard Time, our satellites detected a storm approaching the Ares 3 mission site on Mars. At 6:45, the storm had escalated to severe, and we had no choice but to abort the mission. Thanks to the quick action of Commander Lewis, astronauts Beck, Johansson, Martinez, and Vogel were all able to reach the Mars ascent vehicle and perform an emergency launch at 7:28 Central Time. Unfortunately, during the evacuation, astronaut Mark Watney was struck by debris and killed. Commander Lewis and the rest of her team were able to intercept safely with the Hermes and are now heading home. But Mark Watney is dead.
So the big trauma.
Yes, and before we go into the next scene, we should say, obviously, as always, we are going to spoil the movie for anybody that hasn't watched it.
Right. Yeah, we only do movies that are out on DVD, and if people haven't watched it, you could go watch it. I don't know that it make that big a difference on the themes that we're talking about, but it's always fun to be able to put these scenes that we cut out into a context because I think it makes the experience a little richer.
Right. So on this one, obviously, we're setting it up, and so this team goes up. They had a problem. They had to leave, and they thought that Mark Watney was dead, so they left him behind on Mars.
And here's his response.
Okay. Hello, this is Mark Watney, astronaut. I'm entering this log for the record, in case I don't make it. It is 6:53 on Sol 19, and I'm alive, obviously, but I'm guessing that's going to come as a surprise to my crewmates and to NASA, and to the entire world, really, so... Surprise.
And he naturally, here I am. Although he's naturally doing some of the things that they do talk about, people who feel like they're in isolation, or actually studies of folks who have survived through being alone for days and weeks at a time, either underground or in prison or things like that. And he is having his dialogue. I mean, he's not broadcasting. It's not Skype. He's not Skyping back to Earth. He is talking to himself effectively, knowing that he may never meet humans again, and nobody may ever see this, but he's actually doing what he needs to do, which is having communication, staying alive, feeling like he's interacting with other people and not all alone.
Yes, he's vlogging without an audience.
Yeah.
And that's a really resilient trait, to be able to just kind of pull it together and go, okay, well, I'm going to do this whether I think anybody's ever going to hear it or not. I have to talk about that I am alive and that I'm putting this out there so that they know, on the chance that maybe he can transmit it somehow to them.
And I noticed that, I am almost perfectly balanced I don't have a preference when it comes to extrovert versus introvert. Most of my day is spent in the extrovert, interacting with other people, and when I get home, more people, living in my house. I think they're my family is what they're called. And so there are times where I definitely need to have that alone time, but in the times where my family's gone on a vacation because I work and I can't go with them or whatever, and so I have the house to myself, after maybe a day and a half, 2 days, the dog and I are talking. I mean, he's not talking to me, but I start to there's some need that I have to just start saying things out loud, even though I know nobody else is gonna hear it or respond.
Oh yeah, I think most people do that. I know everybody I know that has a pet starts talking to the pet at some point. And we also even may have the voice respond from the pet to us and answer us.
Yeah, so they're having their own dialogue.
Yes, so you're having, actually a working dialogue with your kitty or your dog. I know I'm totally guilty of that. But yes, it is something that we do when we're isolated. We start looking for how are we going to communicate outside of ourselves, because once you get stuck in the voices in your head, with the thoughts that are going on, you can really kind of get wrapped up in that, and sometimes it's not the best place for people to be.
Right, and
there's certainly not in his situation.
No, because his is dire. I mean, it's not like he can just run out next door. But when people feel isolated, because there's that difference too. It's where you can live in a larger society, and you're going to the store, and you're maybe even going to work, but you still feel that isolation from true human interaction. And that's where the depression starts to get into it. And then depression starts to get you down. And it's like, okay, you got to have a plan. And you don't want to focus on all the bad things. But this kind of, to me, is where he starts to take a turn and says, all right, the odds are like 1,000,000 to 1 that anything good's going to happen to me. But how am I have to address whatever the difficulties are and then make a plan to do something positive.
Yes.
I have no way to contact NASA, and even if I could, it's going to be 4 years until a manned mission can reach me. And I'm in a hab designed to last 31 days. If the oxygenator breaks, I'm going to suffocate. If the water reclaimer breaks, I'll die of thirst. If the hab breaches, I'm just going to kind of implode. And if by some miracle none of that happens, eventually I'm going to run out of food. So, yeah.
So he faces the heaviness of his situation, and in this is about the only point in the movie where you really feel like he's feeling the direness and the crisis that he's really in.
Well, yeah, and he is facing the reality of the situation as it stands. As we get into it, we're going to see that there are options for him that he figures out for how to be able to stay longer on the planet if he needs to. But right then and there, as the situation stands, he's facing the reality of the situation, and that also is very resilient. It's not a happy place to be. It's not something that's going to make him feel better, but it is a place that if people, even if you don't want to know what's going on around you, if you can face the reality, even if it's not what you want to know about, you can then go, okay, now how do I how do I get through this? How do I move through this? Even if at the end of it, he believes he might die, you can forge a path and a plan of action once you understand the reality that you're in.
So the alternative is to go into denial. Like this, I'm not gonna acknowledge all of the bad things that are going on in my life. I'm just gonna be Pollyanna and put on my rose-colored glasses and say, no, everything's okay. But I don't think that actually leads to problem solving and making progress.
That's exactly what I was gonna say, is that it's gonna leave him, just doing day by day and maybe just kind of, enjoying the sun and running around on Mars and all this stuff, just kind of thinking, well, someday somebody will come, like Gilligan's Island. Someday someone will come and get us, but he won't make a plan of action if he just thinks everything's going to be fine. And that's where I think, in life, lots of people get stuck in that. They go, oh, things will just be fine. And that's not how it works. Like, you have to design a plan to help things be better. And it doesn't just get better with time. You have to actively think and do things differently to make things better.
So the downside, and I think this is what we see, you and I probably say a lot in our practices, is that, and it leads really to depression, is when people are just focusing on the negative. Just they're taking their inventory and they're saying, this is bad, that's bad, look how bad I am at this, look how bad life treated me here, look how bad this person treated me here, and they just kind of get stuck on that, all the negatives and everything bad coming into their life, instead of doing what Mark did, which is, I see it and it's dire, now what can I do about it? He made a choice to live.
Exactly. There's certainly a difference between looking at the reality and seeing it and then letting it take over in that negative, in the hopelessness. That's the difference. So some people are built with some innate resilience in them and they don't get hopeless. They go realistic, they go practical, they go problem solving. And some people with, an area of resilience that's not built up in them will go, oh, this is hopeless. This is dire. This is going to end my life. How could my team leave me behind? Why wouldn't they check to make sure I was dead before they took off from Mars? They would go into they must have hated me.
Yeah.
They must have, they must not have cared about me, and then could you imagine being on that isolated, as Mark Watney is, that way, where there's nobody else around you to give you any different viewpoint? Because a lot of times, like, we'll work with people and say, okay, but let's look at exceptions to that script, right? Does everybody really hate you? Did your team really, want to get rid of you? You'd have exceptions to those rules because they'd be interacting with other people on a daily basis. If he went to that place, he might even go the dire route of actually trying to end his life before he watches it happen, and live it out. So, I mean, I think that's one of the coolest things about this movie is that, it went, it was a little far-fetced, I think, on how
all the way to Mars.
Designed to plan, how he ended up sustaining himself.
Sure.
That all of a sudden everything he needed was right there and he had everything working all the time to make it happen. But that's the beauty of movies. And but I think that the great, psychological aspect of it is that it just showed that, you can accept reality as it is and it's terrible and you can still move forward.
Yeah, how to get your best outcome given the situation. When I was in 2000, I was diagnosed with a tumor in my spinal cord, and it was pretty dire. It was right around the the upper part of my neck, and it was they were going to have to do a pretty serious surgery, and people kept giving me books about why does God let bad things happen and how to get through things and how to make the best of a bad situation. I'm like, maybe things are worse than I thought. Because to me, I knew it was going to be tough. I knew that my walking was going to be impacted. I knew there were bad things out there, but I wasn't going to ruin whatever. I had a month to wait for my surgery. I wasn't going to ruin that month by going, oh no, after my surgery, I might be in a wheelchair. It's really going to be terrible. I'm like, I just got to make the best of whatever situation I'm in, no matter what's coming forward in the future. I got to enjoy what's going on right now. And, a buddy of mine said, okay, he has tons of money. He says, okay, well, we can go on a trip wherever you want. And first thing I said to him was, I'm like, well, I'm not going to die. I mean, I'm pretty sure. I mean, there's always a chance when you go in surgery, but I was like, okay, I'm just going to make the best out of it. And like even now when I face a situation, I feel like there's no outcome. I think, okay, I just pretend that there is one. I'm like, there's probably an expert in the field somewhere in whatever problem that I'm dealing with that knows that what the best outcome is I can make out of this situation. So it's my job to find it, because if I believe that there's no good outcome, then I'm going to be hopeless and I'm not even going to try.
Right. And so you're like me, like the ultimate, the ultimate optimist, always kind of looking and knowing that, right, things could always, something might not be good, but you're going to get through it. And, there wasn't a reason for you to think your whole world was going to be destroyed by having this surgery. Right. That even if you ended up in a wheelchair for the rest of your life, and I'm a person who was raised by a paraplegic, so, I know that that doesn't kill a quality of life. Yeah. It just changes it. Yep. And, that even if you were stuck in a wheelchair the rest of your life, you still had your wife, you still had your kids, you still had your profession, your brain was going to be working just fine, you were still going to be the same person, you just would have a different limitation on your physical abilities. And I don't mean to minimize that for anybody, but I know that there are a lot of people out there that, and I say this only because, my father lost the use of his legs at 3 years old to polio, and he ultimately died of post-polio syndrome when he was almost 80. I watched him just adapt his world to what his abilities were and raise 5 kids and be a really physically active father in a way that many people would not have even thought of. Right. And so I think I was raised by a very resilient person. And so hearing your story, certainly I see that there's an innate resilience in you as well.
Yep, you just have to make that decision like Mark did. And it's, again, not a lot of dialogue in this segment, but this is where, he turns around and says, I'm going to do something that's going to have the best outcome for me.
Mm-hmm. I'm not going to die here.
That one simple phrase, I'm not going to die here.
Yeah. And so the power of positive thinking.
Yeah. And okay, so that's a positive thinking. And then you have to take the next step, which is, all right, I could sit here and do nothing and decide I'm not going to die here, or I can create a plan. And here he is creating his plan to live like we all need to do.
Right. Let's do the math. Our service mission here was supposed to last 31 souls. For redundancy, they sent 68 souls worth of food. That's for 6 people. So for just me, that's going to last 300 souls, which I figure I can stretch to 400 if I ration. So I got to figure out a way to grow 3 years worth of food here on a planet where nothing grows. Luckily, I'm a botanist. Mars will come to fear my botany powers.
I thought, how convenient
that he's
for
a botanist. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, we don't hear the story of the guy who was left on Mars who didn't have the skills to make it.
Like me, I do not have the green thumb.
No.
I would not have lasted that extra. And I probably would have done some emotional eating when I first got stuck, so I probably would have been out a few weeks of rations by the time I counted everything.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, you'd want to, right? Like, where's the ice cream? Need some chocolate. Let's get this thing going. Right. But that's the other thing is and you probably have this too. There, especially when I was early on as a new therapist, people would come to me and they'd present a situation and I'd be like, okay, there was not a class on this. There's no right way to solve a problem with a disagreeing spouse when you're talking about money and blah, blah, blah. It's like, I don't have the right answer on how much money you guys should save or not. I don't have that. And then a lot of times, especially with couples, they bring these problems in to you. And but in the course of growing as a therapist, I approach everything, and I'm sure you do too. I never look at somebody and go, it's hopeless. I don't know. You just teach them how to look at their situation in its fullness and not just the microscopic part that they're probably looking at. A lot of times you're backing them out and going, all right, well, let's look at a little bit of bigger picture, and let's look at the strengths of the situation. Let's reframe some of the way you're thinking about it. I could have said, gosh, this is terrible. I'll never be able to run again. Or I could have said, hey, well, at least I'm able to, walk out there, and do stuff with my kids on the basketball court, but I can't show them how to do a layup because I can't do that. So a lot of times when we're working with folks, we're just helping them to create a plan, and it is kind of a cognitive therapy thing, and how to deal with the situation that they're facing at the moment.
And I think of it also as like the workaround. So you have this problem, and it's going to be a perpetual problem. Like there's not going to be like a magic moment where his whole situation changes until someone gets up there to rescue him. Mm-hmm. So that's a perpetual problem. And so we have to look at, and lots of times people in relationship, whether it's a boss and an employee or a couple, they get stuck in these perpetual problems, and we have to look at what's the workaround, because inherently they might have two polar opposite views of the situation. And so, there might not be a direct link, A goes to B goes to C, and then you finish. Mm-hmm. It might be that both of you are doing your unique A steps, and then you go to different things and you get to the workaround that helps solve the problem.
Yeah, and I think one of the things we also do is defining the problem is key in finding that solution. Right. So if you are working with an individual or a couple, or just even in our own lives, we have to say, all right, what's the tension? What's the bind? What's the speed bump? What's the hurdle that we're facing right now? And then you can start to create the solution. And then the next part is the cognitive pieces that get in our way, right? The things that where we're saying, I don't think I can do this, or this really isn't for me, or we start to say, I'm so stupid that I can't figure this out. Why I'm so dumb. If I was smarter, I'd be able to handle this, or if the world was nicer, I'd be able to deal with it. But the world keeps giving me a raw deal, and so there's all the not only creating the plan and developing the solution, but then the cognitive changes that we all need to make in order to fully address or properly address the solution.
Right, and being able to see, I know I started out by saying the power of positive thinking, and really like identifying what it is that you want the resolution to be. Mm-hmm. And once you decide what that end is going to be, then you can visualize, and then you can problem solve, and then you can know what the little steps are that you're going to take to get there.
Mm-hmm. And I think part of the problem that people run into is they'll visualize that end, and it's so far away. And they're like, I don't know how to handle that because I can't get from point A to point Q.
And that's why I was saying about like you have to identify smaller steps that you take, because you have to go A to Q, mm-hmm. but step B might be just writing down the list of things that you think you need to do in order to get to Q, mm-hmm. right? So you're already starting to move forward by identifying things. Then it's like out of a list, anytime you have anybody identify a list of, like, say anybody listening sets a goal for themselves, you list everything that you think it will take to get to that goal. And there's usually something in that list that you are already doing, or something in that list that is very easy to just start doing today. Mm-hmm. And so it makes it more realistic, it makes you more hopeful, it gives you something tangible that you can be working on. And so I think that looking at what are the ways that you can take small steps to get to the bigger end goal is the way that people become successful at that.
Yeah, I was talking to actually one of our young therapists at the office this week, and she sat down in my office and she said, you know what, I just need to bounce some things off you because my husband and I are debating. And I'm like, okay, well, what's going on? He said, well, we're trying to figure out what city we should live in because, I want our kids to be able to get the best education and go to the best colleges. So I'm like, okay, how old are your kids again? She's like, well, I don't have any kids yet. I said, oh, okay. So you're worried about what, like 20 years down the road? I said, right now, if you ask me what my this weekend's going to be like, I would tell you what I'm going to do this weekend. It's a long weekend, Memorial Day weekend. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. And then if you talk to me on Tuesday when I'm back at work, I'll tell you that my weekend was entirely different than I thought it was going to be. I said, so for you to be having this anxiety about your kids getting into the right college when you haven't even had kids yet, I understand the goal, but you're really binding yourself down in the minutia of all of this, these decision making. I mean, I guarantee you're going to be in a much different place than you really thought you were going to be just 5 years from now.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a funny problem. I can think of a couple I know that's looking at nursery schools and they're only 3 months pregnant.
Yeah.
So,
right.
So, yeah, that's a very common anxiety then, and problem. So, right. So people often worry and they don't understand what the end goal is, right? So for the couple that's stuck on debating over where they should live, they need to do something that is more tangible today than what they think is going to happen 18 to 22 years from now when they have a kid that needs to go to college. So they would need to look at what are the things going on in the town, what are the things that are attractive to them in that town that would call them to go and live there, as opposed to where is our kid that we may or may not have in a few years going to go to school.
I think there's a balance in planning for the future and handling what is actually happening. I find that one of the most difficult things I have is when I'm struggling against the way I think things should be versus the way they are, right? It's like, no, it's not supposed to go like this, not supposed to go like this. And I hold on to an impossible outcome because that's the situation that I had envisioned, instead of taking a step back going, all right, I got a new element in here. There's something new in my cake mix. What kind of cake am I going to make now? I got to adjust. I have to modify that original goal and not just struggle against the way I think things should and ought to be. I just have to deal with, all right, well, now I've got a new element, so I'm going to adjust my course.
Right. I think it was Tony Robbins who famously says, stop shoulding all over yourselves. And really, being able to be flexible in your plan is one of the most resilient traits a person can have. Being able to be adaptable, flexible, understanding that, yes, your plan can be outlined and you can think you've got it all down, but when that road bump comes in the way or the actual, path changes, to be able to be flexible and adapt to that and go, okay, well, let's see where this path leads me. I didn't know it was going to happen, but here I'm going to have to adapt to it. Just like you and your surgery, right? Life was going along and fine, and you probably discovered it through some odd ways. Many people discover tumors, maybe at a pain or something like that. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I didn't know that this was going to happen. I never expected this. I never thought this should happen to me. I'm a healthy person and live a good life and all those things. And you had to adapt.
Yep. And one of the therapists that I work with, matter of fact, my partner at work, we've been working together almost 21 years. And she and I are personality-wise very different on one of the scales, and that is concluder. She's a quick concluder. She's a decision maker. It makes her a great administrator. I'm glad she's, the boss. And me, I'm more, it's called a perceiver, where I'm slower to make decisions and I gather a lot more information. And I've always told her, I said, I really appreciate the fact that as a concluder, because she's a high concluder, and as a concluder, she is open to new information. So she's like, all right, here's what we're going to do. This is what we're going to do. And we're going to move forward at this trajectory. I'm like, okay, I will go along with you because I really haven't finished analyzing this problem in order to set a course for our direction. But okay, I will follow you. And then when new information comes up, she, unlike a lot of people who make decisions quickly, is able to be nimble enough to reconclude, redecide, readjust that trajectory and say, all right, well, I didn't anticipate that. I'll make a new decision now. And for me, I'm such like, when I finally make a decision, I commit to it. And so I follow through and I'm grinding it out. And I say I even commit to a grocery line. I'm like, no, I've decided. I'm not making any more decisions about this grocery line. I'm going to stand in this grocery line and follow this thing through. Even though she commits quickly, she'll adjust it. Whereas I commit slowly because I hate making decisions. So when I finally make a decision, I'm sticking with it.
You sound like me and my business partner, and I'm the concluder in mine. So, yeah.
It fits well. So moving on to, actually, we get to, here's, look, some relationship stuff. The next one is it's about Mark and the crew and what happened between them.
Yes.
No, if Watney is really alive, we don't want the Ares 3 crew to know.
How can you not tell them?
They have another 10 months on their trip home. Space travel is dangerous. They need to be alert and undistracted.
But they already think he's dead.
And they'd be devastated to find out they left him there alive.
I'm sorry, but you have not thought this through. I mean, what are we going to say? Dear America, remember that astronaut we killed and had a really nice funeral for? Turns out he's alive and we left him on Mars. Our bad. Sincerely, NASA. I mean, do you realize the shitstorm that is about to hit us?
How are we going to handle the public?
Legally, we have 24 hours to release these pictures.
We release a statement with them. We don't want people working it out on their own.
Yes, sir.
But if my math is right, he's going to starve to death long before we can help him.
You even imagine what he's going through up there. I mean, he's 50 million miles away from home. He thinks he's totally alone. He thinks we gave up on him. I mean, what does that do to a man psychologically? The hell is he thinking right now?
I'm definitely gonna die up here if I have to listen to any more god-awful disco music.
You know, that first voice that you hear, the more I listen to it, I'm like, oh, this is just like, it's either like a boss or a dad who's just going, I have made the decision. They don't need any more stress. They don't need to struggle with the fact that they left their buddy back on Mars and he's still alive. We will protect him from this. But it all boils down to, they feel like for whatever good or noble reasons, they have to keep a secret from the crew.
Secrets are tough in any kind of relationship, to have secrets.
So do you believe that in relationship you should always have 100% honesty all the time? I love the gravity of the question because you're like, dang it, this is.
I normally answer so fast.
There's no easy answer to this, right?
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, like, I think we all need to have some tact, and we don't need to tell our partner every single thing that we think about them as it happens. But I do think, and I know, like, even this week, I can think of couples who I advised and said, please, whatever you do, please tell your partner about this before you make this drastic decision. And because I believe it will have grave implications for your relationship if they find out after the fact. And that happens a lot. I think people get to a point where they get afraid of what their part. It's like, you know, we often turn ourselves into like parent-child relationships. Sometimes we act like rebellious teenagers in relationships. So just like this boss, you know, the head of NASA, you know, did and made this decision and said, no, I'm not going to upset the kids. I'm not going to tell them because they're going to freak out. They're going to be upset up there in space. We need them to have their thinking caps on and be able to get home safely, right? So I think we do that in relationships sometimes, that we go, okay, well, mommy or daddy's going to be mad at me if I do this, so I'm just not going to tell them. Those kind of things that I think get us into trouble in relationships. I think if your partner annoys you about something, or they're wearing like a hideous shirt, you know, or or their haircut looks really bad, you know, I don't know if I need to tell them that, but I'll just, you know, hope it grows out fast, or that they, you know, spill something that can't be taken out of the shirt, you know, on it, so they can never wear it again. So
not letting you do my laundry.
Right, I'll accidentally drop a pen in the laundry with
it. Yeah, I've been fired from a lot of significant household chores because I'm not very good at them, you know, because I just dry everything, and my wife's not happy about when I do those types of things. But you know, so there's kind of like lies of omission and lies of commission. Like, are you making up something and saying something that's not true? Or are you just avoiding saying something that is true, but you didn't lie about it. You just didn't talk about it.
See, right. Now I was thinking about the avoidance, and whether that's avoiding saying something that's going to hurt your partner's feelings that you just don't like in the moment, or whether it's these major decisions that you're going to make that will have implications on the relationship. And, sometimes people will take a job that like gives them an extra hour of commute, or take a job that's going to give them extra hours every week that they're not going to be at home, and they'll do that without telling the partner, and they'll say, oh, but we'll work it out after, but it's a really good thing for me, so I'm going to do it. But you're talking about making up, you just mentioned actually making up stories. That I would not, that I don't endorse.
So the commission, the actually telling untruths.
Right, so what the director here was saying was the lie of omission. He just wasn't going to say anything. He wasn't going to say that, oh, we found out it's not true. He wasn't going to make anything up. He was just not going to tell them. And I think certainly you get into a tangled web of one little white lie snowballs, or has a propensity to. So I don't see a lot of times where that would be useful in a relationship.
No, and because then what it actually the conversation turns into is not what you lied about, but why you chose to lie about it, right? And which erodes. I mean, that's the cancer, or that's the what's that stuff that acid? That's like the acid of the relationship, because it's like if I can't trust you, then it definitely kills the relationship, because every relationship is built on trust. Because if you have to vet every statement someone makes, every truth that, okay, well, where were you? Oh, well, I thought you stopped by the store on the way. Oh, yeah, sorry, I forgot to tell you about that on the way home. You didn't tell me you stopped at the store, things like that. So I'm sure I stole this from some therapist that I either learned about or interacted with, but a family is as sick as its secrets. And I thought that's really, that's profound. It's stuck with me ever since I was in school, because that's what I see over and over and over, whether it is I was just talking to someone who found out that they have a sibling who's 52 years old, didn't know that their mom had a kid before they got married. Now mom and dad are both dead, and aunt comes and says, hey, by the way, this 51-year-old lady contacted me on Facebook, and actually she's your half sibling. Yeah. Well, that just crushes, because that's a lie of omission, right? From mom. Right. Never told the new kids that they're in the new relationship that there was this previous one. But what it did was it colored every memory she had. She's like, I thought I was close with my mom. I thought we had a connection, and it's like, well, you did, but for whatever reason, she didn't. So it just that type of not a little lie, but it's a lie of omission, just colored everything in her now deceased parents, in the memory of her now deceased parents' relationship with her.
Right. And I'm having flashbacks to our episode on
Inside Out.
Yes, I'm having flashbacks to our episode on Inside Out, where we talked a lot about that theme of changing memories and how they can be tainted by what we know of the story. What you're bringing up is, the family is as sick as its secrets, right? Because secrets usually indicate that there's something to be shameful about that. Right. And of course, we see generations upon generations of family that have abuse, that have incest, that have all these heavy duty, like really burdensome things that have gone on, and people feel ashamed of it, even if they're the victim. They feel ashamed of it. It's kind of like it's their family legacy is shame and secrets. And most of the work that we do as systems-based relationship therapists is trying to untangle the mess that a lot of the secrets have caused, and helping people let go of the shame, let go of this burden that they're carrying around, that it's not theirs, that it's not their responsibility to carry anymore, and helping them unload that. So secrets can, if someone is finding themselves in a relationship where they feel like they have to even tell like little white lies, like saying they're working late because they want to go out like to happy hour with their friends, or that they want to go, meet a friend for dinner after work. If you're having to tell little white lies or feeling like you have to, I would, kind of give it a little pause and look at what's going on in the relationship that you're feeling like you couldn't just be honest about it, and maybe talk with your partner about that. because why create this scenario? Because, right, one little white lie of like, oh, well, working late turns into going out to dinner with a friend, turns into, well, now I feel betrayed because you lied to me. And people don't get that it's not about the situation that happened, because the situation is relatively mundane in that case.
Mm-hmm.
And then it turns into, the whole aspect of trust. And trust is such a fragile piece, and it takes so long to build and sustain and really know that it's strong in a relationship, that when it starts to get untangled through those kinds of interactions, it really becomes something that can break an entire, relationship.
Yeah, and when I've had people that either didn't tell me things or actively told me something that wasn't true, so they were keeping their secret, there are times where I'm like, did you not think that I was strong enough to be able to handle this? So it's almost, there's a level of offense too, where it's, look, what you're talking about is what you lied to me about. It made me feel better for a moment, but what made you think that I wouldn't have been able to handle the truth? And if that's something about you or something about our relationship, then I want to know it. I'd rather live in the completely known, because it may be more messy, more dirty, and I may have to struggle with it, but at least I'm struggling with something that's real. Because I don't know, there's something, and different people have different levels, but there's something in each person that kind of is that I call a crap detector. It's like that I don't know what it is that's not meshing here, that's not fitting, but there's something. And the more of that you have in a relationship, I think the less real relationship you have, because you're like, well, I don't even know you, because you're presenting this falseness and just making me question everything you say when I probably don't have a reason to, but because there's these other things on the side that are unanswered and don't compute, it makes the quality of our relationship goes down, because I don't think I can trust you. So that was one of the problems that he faced. But like every plan, they don't always go right, but you have to adjust and pick a new plan. And fortunately, they don't send dumb guys to space. This guy's pretty smart, so he starts to come up with his new plan.
Okay, so here's the rub. I've got one working rover designed to go a max distance of 35 kilometers before the battery has to be recharged at the hab. That's problem A. Problem B is this journey is going to take me roughly 50 days to complete, so I gotta live for 50 days inside a rover with marginal life support the size of a small van. So, in the face of overwhelming odds, I'm left with only one option. I'm gonna have to science the shit out of this.
Mark Watney just continues to show all sorts of resilience through that. I love that line, I'm going to science the shit out of this. Mm-hmm. I think I want to find ways to use that sometime.
Get a t-shirt.
Yeah. But, he's always so hopeful. Like, this is another one of those points where he could go, oh my God, like, how the hell am I going to get out of this? And he does, but not in this hopeless way. He goes, well, I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to problem solve. I'm going to figure something out. And, and he does have a lot of resources at his command. I mean, like, for whatever reason, he's able to have, he's solar power, right? So he's got all of his electronic stuff works, water pumps work, all these things are happening. So he figures out the plan that's going to help him sustain, and he builds some vegetation and does what he knows best to do as this botanist, which I still think is like the funniest connection they made. That let's leave him there as a botanist so he can grow his own food. Yeah, that's brilliant.
Why are they taking a botanist up there anyway, right? I mean, I guess
at least they didn't leave a therapist up there, because we couldn't have figured much out.
No, we our science is very, 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 very soft science. But I was
gonna say, as my my ex would say, you are a soft scientist.
Yeah,
he was a hard scientist.
That's true. That's true. Math is not our strength on this thing, but we do encounter people who think that they're facing insurmountable odds, and oftentimes the odds that they're facing are the odds to do what they thought they were gonna do in life, or thought that the way that their life would go. So they're kind of struggling to climb a mountain that almost doesn't exist anymore. It's like, okay, you have to reset your priorities, because you're getting hopeless when you keep encountering the same situation, the same life struggle, the same struggle in a relationship with somebody, and you just have to readjust your trajectory. You have to look at something different and try to find, where is their hope in this? If it's the end of a relationship, then it's like, all right, well, let's turn your face away from trying to make this broken relationship that you're not going to make work. Let's turn it to a new direction, because you're going to be hopeless if you keep trying to build that relationship or get that job that you're not going to get. So let's just change your view and look at something that you can have hope about.
Right. And also when we hear him talking like this, like, we should point out too that he's still doing that other thing of just recording himself. Mm-hmm. He is, dialoguing with himself or monologuing.
Yeah.
And, and staying connected. Like, I think there's something tangible when you're trying to problem solve, to listen to your own voice and talk it out. Mm-hmm. And he has no one to talk it out with, so he's doing it through these video logs that he's recording.
And a lot of times when I'm working with someone, I'll that's kind of perseverating, or their same thoughts or keep spinning or whatever, I try to get them into either list making or journaling a little bit, and even if they aren't, because what happens in our heads is our brain will keep going in all these different directions, or all the same directions. So this creates this loop, this pattern, this thought, and when you objectify it or put it outside of yourself, or like he's doing, he's trying to discuss something in a coherent way with his imaginary audience. He can't just keep going through the same motions again and getting stuck in the same place. He has to perpetuate his own thought process and not just stay stuck in the little spinny eddy there.
And what you're pointing out too, making me think of this exercise that I teach couples, and it's about stress reducing. It's about a conversation. It's one of these Gottman exercises that I do. But one question can shortcut so much. And it's, what would be the worst thing that's going to happen to you in this situation? For him, now, and if you think about, like, in just our normal everyday worry, where we're not stuck on Mars and we just have normal life problems,
yes,
and we can get caught up in the anxiety about, oh my gosh, what's happening? How am I going to get out of this? How am I going to fix this? Ask yourself, like, what's the worst thing that I think is going to happen to me in this situation? And most of the time when we pull it into, there's always what's the fantasy in my head, the real terrible stuff, and then what's the reality?
Right.
Usually the reality is not nearly as scary as we make it out to be. And I think that when we have someone who's perseverating, as you're saying, that can help pull them right out. And I'll ask my clients, rather than even in the couples context, I'll ask my clients and say, well, what do you think is going to be the worst thing that's going to happen to you in this situation? And then when they come up with that, oh, well, it might not go the way that I planned. Okay, so, and what would happen from there? Well, probably nothing, or whatever. There might be a small thing to happen, but it's never as bad as they make it out to be, or they think it to be. So then I'll have them write that down. Whatever that worst case scenario is, they can write that down and kind of write then, okay, and then what's the way that, you kind of accept that. And then they can move forward. And for him, he's going to science the shit out of it. It's, what's the worst that's going to happen to him? Well, either way, in one case scenario, if he does nothing, he's going to die.
Right.
And on the other one, if he does get to do all of his science and make things change and happen, he has a chance of getting found. And so then there is no worst case scenario on that one. Like, the chances are that maybe, well, I guess the worst case scenario is that
he's going to die.
Chances are he's going to die. But the other flip side of that is, if he keeps going, then he gives himself a much better chance of sustaining himself, which gives him a longer chance of getting found, because he can maybe science his way into connecting with NASA.
Yeah, I like that kind of. I heard a UFC fighter talk about it. He says, before I go into a fight, I make friends with the worst outcome. He says, okay, so I'm going to lose.
Like that.
So there you go. I'm going to lose. Now I go on and I try to create a plan that makes it so I'm not going to lose. But if I do, I've already made friends with it. It's already there. They already know that, because when you get your butt beat in the UFC, it's on TV. It goes on the records. People are taking stills. All of a sudden now you got all these guys tweeting you going, yep, you got knocked out. See, you suck. Okay. thanks. I've already, so there's all that public humiliation and all the rest of it, which for most of us in most situations, like even like a wife who keeps the secret of her husband who had an affair, even though they got divorced, they don't want to worry about their, what people are going to know. Ultimately people may know. And then what? It's like, okay. Right. And then what are they going to do? They're going to hate you. They're going to disown you because you had a husband who stepped out on you. Chances are people are going to be more likely to befriend you because the odds are they're going to be able to relate to you, or they'll relate to you because maybe it didn't happen in their own life, but someone, maybe their brother or sister had an affair and they got cheated. Right. I mean, it's just, it's like anything. When you are honest and put some of your difficult situations out there, you'd be surprised how many other people can relate to it, whether they've had it directly happen to them or not.
Yes. And I say a lot of times to my clients, I'll say, and so what? Like, oh, so-and-so is going to tell my friends about this, or they're going to say that or whatever when you've got like an ugly divorce going on. And I'll say, and so what? Mm-hmm. What does it matter? Are you afraid your friends are not going to be friends with you any longer? Are you afraid, like if it was you and somebody came to you and said, oh, did you know so-and-so had an affair? Or, oh, did you know so-and-so is getting divorced? Like, are you going to drop your friend because of that? And inevitably they say no. And it's like, okay, well then if somebody needs to spread stuff about you, even if it's the truth, right, it doesn't matter. Your life will go on. You're still the same person. You're not a bad person. Just allow it to go on. You're not going to be harmed by it.
Yeah, it all comes down to those cognitive games we play in our head.
Right. And sorry, and I was going to say you would get harmed by it by letting it feel shameful.
Yeah, letting it define you and letting yourself be shameful. Yeah, because there's almost nothing in my life that I'm like, okay, well, if someone found out there you go, I'm ruined, and now nobody will like me, and the people who loved me before are going to hate me now. But it wasn't always that way, right? When something immediately happens, you feel like, okay, well, I don't want to let anybody know because I can pretend that this didn't happen. And then, 2-3 years down the road, you're saying it at cocktail parties. So all of a sudden, you're letting your own secret out, and it's not going to own you. You don't spend your whole life trying to feel like a fraud, and if people only knew me. But there's a benefit to addressing things when they're a problem, and sometimes a little bit of denial helps, and that's what Mark has to do in a couple situations.
I have doubled my battery life by scavenging Rover 1. But if I use the heater, I will burn through half my battery every day. If I do not use my heater, I will be slowly killed by the laws of thermodynamics. I would love to solve this problem right now, but unfortunately, my balls are frozen.
Good news, I may have a solution to my heating problem. Bad news, it involves me digging up the radioisotope thermoelectric generator. Now, if I remember my training correctly, one of the lessons was titled, Don't Dig Up the Big Box of Plutonium, Mark. I get it, RTGs are good for spacecraft, but if they rupture around humans, no more humans. Which is why we buried it when we arrived. And planted that flag so we would never be stupid enough to accidentally go near it again. But, as long as I don't break it...
I almost just said everything will be fine out loud. Look, the point is I'm not cold anymore. And sure, I could choose to think about the fact that I'm warm because I have a decaying radioactive isotope riding right behind me, but right now I got bigger problems on my hands.
So denial, it can be helpful, but he's really actually not in denial. He's just taking the cost benefit or the risk analysis and saying, look, I got to stay warm and I'm going to risk being exposed to radioactivity, but this is the best choice I have. I'm not going to get stuck on the fact that there's no good choices in my situation.
Right. He's choosing not to think about the worst case scenario in that moment. Mm-hmm. And he has to. It's a survival tactic.
Yeah, it really is. It helps him survive emotionally, intellectually, and maintain hope, and also survive physically so that he doesn't freeze to death by the laws of thermodynamic, whatever the heck he just said. So
Right.
now actually we start to get some of the relationship stuff back into our conversation, and he establishes communication, which tells us a lot, right? Because he's been isolated, he's been alone, as every one of us has felt. Never like on Mars, but sometimes I might feel like Mars. So this is the scene where he actually is first time establishes communication back with Earth.
Incoming.
This is Earth.
Are you receiving me? Yes. No. Okay. Point the camera at yes.
32-minute round-trip communications time. All he can do is ask yes, no questions. No, all we can do is point the camera. This won't exactly be an Algonquin roundtable of snappy repartee.
Okay. Tell. Just point the camera.
Roger that. Pointing the camera.
I think there are two things. Success of the plan that it's actually going to happen, and success in he's actually communicating with other people.
Right. All of a sudden, literally the world has opened up to him again, and he is no longer alone.
So the value of human communication is something that I think in our digital age, we say, gosh, we're always talking to a bunch of people. We're always communicating. Right. We're always on Facebook. We're always messaging people. We're always texting. We're always doing these things. And yet people don't feel, I think more people feel like they're alone than they used to before we had all this technology to keep us connected.
In doing our behind the scenes work for this episode, we found some articles on that, and there was an article on Psychology Today by a guy named Corey Floyd who wrote about a study that was done, and it said that loneliness among American adults has increased 16% in the last decade. Wow. Which we've had social media for just about that long, maybe a little bit less, and which makes no sense and then makes all the sense, right? Because you can be on Facebook and, we all know that, like, of course, there's the drama queens who post every little thing that happens that upsets them in a day. Right. And the things that they're looking for the kudos on, like, oh, sorry to hear that and all that stuff. But for the most part, we put our best faces out on social media. And we may be connected to a couple of thousand people in some respects, like our Twitter accounts and things like that, but we're not connected to those people. And it can feel isolating to, like, watch other people's lives go on if you're not living such an active or socially connected life in real time.
Yeah, I was just doing that this weekend. I'm like, wow, I didn't go to the beach. I didn't go on a mini vacation on Memorial Day. That's something I should be doing. And so I could get down on the fact that I got, I'm just hanging out with my family and having friends over and having a barbecue and the rest of it. But it's like, well, no, what am I? I'm comparing. I can't be both places. I got to make some choices. And so I choose to enjoy where I am and not look at everybody else's stuff, because there's also something about that human face-to-face interaction. I mean, I could have the best texting communication with somebody, or messaging, whatever it is, for an evening, an hour, maybe two or whatever. It doesn't leave me with the same physical reaction, or I don't know if it's brain chemistry or whatever, as opposed to if I just sat down and had a meal with somebody, that same person. It's entirely different.
Oh yeah, and I get that as well. I mean, like, you have that tactile, you have facial expressions, you have body language, you have so many nonverbals that go on in a face-to-face conversation that you just don't get with text messages, no matter how many emojis you throw in there.
Or a GIF or two. Yeah.
Yeah. And so there's a lot to be said about, connecting offline.
One of the things that we picked out as a theme here was loneliness, and we have another clip on that, so we can continue to push this theme forward in the loneliness that he felt. But I love that how he actually still talks to his shipmates even after they're gone. And here's a clip from that.
Hexadecimals. Hexadecimals to the rescue. I figured one of you guys kept an ASCII table lying around. And I was right. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you super nerd Beth Johansson. who also had copies of Zork 2 and Leather Goddesses of Phobos on her personal laptop. Seriously, Johansson, it's like the Smithsonian of loneliness on there. Not that I'm complaining. Yes! Who am I to talk about loneliness?
There's a difference between being alone and being lonely, right?
Yes. Yes. There are definitely people who are okay with being alone. They don't get lonely. There are some people who just those connections are not necessarily necessary. Or what did I just say?
They're not necessarily necessary.
necessary for feeling like they're living a full life. And I think we know of those types of people. But the average person needs connection. And doesn't have to be like, I'm an extrovert, so I get fueled up by social connection. I love interacting with people. That's where I get my energy. And so, it's not like everybody has to be an extrovert and connect, but there's something to be said about the interaction, even physical interaction. Like this same article that I was just talking about mentions that 3 out of 4 adults agree that Americans suffer from skin hunger, meaning just physical touch. Like you need someone to give you a hug every once in a while or shake your hand, just physical interaction. I know when we work with abused kids, they have been told, okay, now you're in the, maybe they've been removed from home, so they're in like the foster care system, and if they're in group homes, there's not a lot of physical touch unless they're doing things to act out. And sometimes the best thing you can do for a little kid is give them a hug, because they need physical connection. It makes people feel whole.
We assign so much meaning to physical interaction. I mean, I remember a study that was done at a library, college library, and they were trying to see if touch actually impacted people's perception of the library. So the study that they did was very simple. Either on the checkout, like after they checked out their book, either the librarian touched their hand as they gave them their card back or didn't touch their hand as they gave them their card back. It made a difference on their perception of the library. The people who got a hand touch on when they were checking out their book had a higher perception of their experience at the library than those who didn't. Yet we're putting all kinds of constraints around it, right? I mean, teachers are being prohibited from hugging a kid at school, and if you touch somebody on the shoulder or the elbow at work, you could be worried about, am I sexually harassing them? It's so we're we're regulating physical touch and interaction in a way that I think continues to isolate us. It's if you were in a crowd, let's say you go to a cocktail party or just some gathering of a birthday party or whatever, and all of a sudden somebody puts their hand on basically like your shoulder blade. Like you can feel all 5 fingers and their hand on your shoulder blade in a nice, friendly, they just keep it there for about a second and a half. You're going to go, oh, I'm going to turn around to probably somebody I know who's very kind, and yet we worry about touching other people because we're not sure how they're going to respond. And I think in this tactile, in this world where touch is very important, but so regulated, we don't do it for fear of, having somebody take offense or someone being hurt by it, because you were talking about foster kids, there's tactile defensiveness, whereas any touch feels like hostile. So there's so much information out there. We don't know whether we're allowed to touch anybody or not.
Right. And even in intimate relationships, the Gottmans, and I mention them a lot just because that's the relationship therapy that I practice, but I have a coffee mug from them that even has, have you had your 6-second kiss today? Because their studies over 40 years of couples showed that one of the ways that couples feel connected, like the perfect amount of time to kiss every day, is 6 seconds. So
does it have to be with the same person?
It's a lot more fun when it's different people, but for someone like yourself who's been married a million years,
25.
Right.
Yeah.
So, just think about, next time you kiss your wife, make it 6 seconds long and see what that actually feels like.
I'll have to take a big breath. I'll hold my breath as I go in.
You'll have to warn her before you go in.
Yeah,
for
exactly.
It.
I'm going for 6 seconds, darling. We're gonna break our record. But one of the things, I went to a training on child abuse, and it was early on in my marriage, and it was something that really opened up my eyes about touch and touch sensitivity and preferences. My wife likes very, very light touch, which to me feels like spiders, right? Mm-hmm. So she just likes the delicate on her forearm. She's light touch, just like tickle. And if she were to do that to me, I'd be like, okay, it itches. Okay, stop it. That's not what I want. So I like more of like the petting of a cat, but that's touch, both touch, but one feels good to one person, doesn't feel good to the other person. So even at that, you have to communicate in your relationships about, or maybe just one relationship, about what type of touch do you like? I mean, do you like a back rub, or do you want a tickle on the back? I mean, some things people are like, man, I tried to touch you and then every time you shrugged me off. Well, maybe you're not doing it the way that they receive it well.
Communicating about that, talking about that, asking about that. How do you like to be touched? Where do you like to be touched? And then just on the friend end of things, you have friends that are just socially, touchy-feely and huggers and things like that. Some friends, will grab somebody's hand as they go places and stuff. And they're very they communicate through their touch. Touching is communication, right? You said when you described the hand on the shoulder at the party, I was thinking, right, that feels very welcoming and it feels warm and welcoming, and you turn around and you're already feeling good. Whoever did that to you is looking forward to seeing you too. So right. It's going to be someone that you're happy to see.
Yeah, it's the message. It's when the messages aren't clear that a touch is hard to tolerate, right? It's like if somebody just walks up and slaps you on the back, it's like, okay, well, I think I know what that means. But when you're talking about a couple or other relationship, like you talk about someone holding your hand as you walk around, I hold my kid's hand as we walk and whatever. Sometimes he's helping me because I need to go up steps or something big like that. But it's as long as we all know what the message is and we agree on the message, I think that because you could put your hand on, or hold hands with a guy who's you're not romantic with, and as long as you know and he knows that this is the message, that we're just sending the message that we're together and we're here and whatever, as long as you both agree on the messages, I think it's okay. But it must be that when the touch is confusing or you don't know that you're on the same page, that's when the touch is like, it's not welcome, it's not not warm. Now we're moving on. It's more along the secrets, because the crew does ultimately find out that Mark Watney is alive, and right. Here's the way they respond.
It's addressed to the whole crew. Play it. Come on, guys.
I want to get in on that telemetry action.
Hi, hello, it's Mitch Henderson. I have some news. There's no subtle way to put this. Mark Watney is still alive.
Oh my God.
I know that's a surprise, and I know you'll have a lot of questions, but here are the basics. He's alive, and he's healthy. We found out 2 months ago, and decided not to tell you.
2 months?
Oh my God.
I was strongly against that decision. We're telling you now because we finally have communication with him and a viable rescue plan. We'll give you a write-up of what happened, a full write-up of everything, but it's not your fault. Mark stresses that every time it comes out. So, take some time to absorb this, and send all the questions you want, we'll answer them. All right, Henderson out.
Holy shit, he's alive.
Yeah, there are two responses, right? Wow, he's alive, and 2 months you've known and didn't tell us?
Yeah.
And I think that echoes what we were talking about earlier about secrets. It's like, well, how long have you known this? And that becomes paramount.
Right, and they're going to have to decipher then, like any other message they get from their command station, is that going to be something that is true, right? Because they've now been betrayed as a team, and essentially the mothership has betrayed them, and so they are going to have to figure out what ultimately they do. And I think, without spoiling anything, because I don't think we're going there, they hatch a plan that they go against NASA and to go and find him and get him. They come up with a plan. So and that's at that point because they feel like, I mean, there's part of it fueling it that I believe would be that they just can't, how can they trust what NASA's going to tell them about what's in their best interest if they kept that secret from them for 2 months? And then when they decide and figure out that there's a plan to get him, they feel compelled to just go and do it against NASA's orders.
Yeah, so they kept their secret, their decision secret from their commanders, and you kind of can't blame them after they were put in that situation where they weren't told. It's like, they're big enough people, they're astronauts, they're pretty, well adjusted to dealing with problems, and they're obviously smart people. Why couldn't they tell them? It's like they got underestimated by their command.
Yes, and they had to come up with something on their own,
okay,
or make decisions outside of their boss's approval.
And one of the things they had to do, and I didn't pull this clip because actually I just missed it, but they got to message Mark, and so the crew was messaging him, and it sent me into researching about sarcasm and about written communication. We'll have a little piece on that coming up in a bit, but they do what I consider guys, because the guy was writing to Mark, it's like, yeah, we left you there because we really don't like you. It was sarcasm. It was easy because he was reading it out loud so we could hear the tone and the smile in his voice. And I think guys do it, and I know women do it, but just there's something about giving someone else crap and being sarcastic that almost is relationship building. Yet when I was reading about it, that was all the bad things about sarcasm, and I'm like, okay, but if you don't have an underlying, hostility that you're just being passive aggressive and expressing, can't you say, man, I wish I was as lucky as that? Well, you may be really wishing you were as lucky as that, but you may also be saying you don't deserve it. You don't work as hard as you should. Why do you have it and I don't have it? So sarcasm is rough.
And it does get a bad rap. I mean, certainly there are times when people just use it to make undercutting statements at people. In this case, this also was used as a very good defense mechanism because they were the reality is they were devastated. They had immense regret. They felt guilty. They had, they were scared for him. They were scared for if the mission was going to work to pick him up. And so, it worked as this wonderful way of keeping them hopeful, keeping them connected, keeping it light, because because once you get into, oh man, I'm so sorry, we did this, where does it go from there except, oh, it's okay, but it's not really okay,
Yeah, you left me on Mars, but he absolved them very well, yes, because he knew exactly what they saw and why they made the decisions they made.
Right, but you almost have to go into a lighter frame of communication to pull yourself out of, okay, so that's all the hopeless, that's the regret, that's the remorse that we have. Now, what do we do to kind of feel like we're back to normal? Okay, because we normally joke with each other, so let's joke about it. We left you behind on purpose. We didn't like you. And now we're coming to get you because we love you. And we would never have done that to you on purpose.
Well, in dealing with sarcasm in real life, I think if it's of the what I would call of the negative nature, where someone is being sarcastic and they really have an underlying message, what I try to do, or if I can think about it in the moment, or what I advise people to do if we're talking about it, is to clarify. Say, I'm getting mixed messages here. You say it; these are your words, but I interpret them to mean this. Which one of those are you talking? So just kind of pulling the covers on sarcasm and addressing it and asking for clarification and giving that person the option to dig themselves out of the hole that they're digging with their sarcasm.
Yeah, because some people just don't get that what they're saying is really hurtful. You'll be playing sports with somebody, playing, whatever, and somebody may be giving you hell over, how you're playing, and at some point they say something that really taps into one of your own insecurities about your performance. Yeah. Then you go, oh, wait a minute, were they purposely trying to hurt me? And that's a good exercise. Usually your gut tells you, ooh, that hurt me.
Right.
And when it happens, like, you can't always trust your gut, because sometimes it's just tapping into something that's one of your own triggers and they're not trying to. But that's when you go and say, hey, you know what? That comment, like, I get it. We're joking. You're giving me shit, but what did you mean by that? Did you really mean for me to feel this way? Because that comment made me feel like you're saying I'm not playing good, or that comment made me feel like you really don't even think I'm any good at this. Is that for true? Is that truth?
Right.
So,
yeah. So you clarify on the sarcasm is the best way out of it. And so another thing is we'll go. We got 2 more clips, and there's we could do a whole show just on interpreting 2-dimensional, I call them. And basically they were doing text messaging, and they're figuring out how to get Mark Watney off Mars, and the scientists in this first half of this clip are figuring out how to get him off Mars with how to build the ship and the rest of it. And the second part is they send a message to Mark and on how they're going to do it, and he responds, and they try to figure out how he is actually responding, because they clearly don't have the voice tone or the nonverbal to go on. They just have the text.
You want to send a man into space without the fun of his ship?
No. We're going to have him cover it with pad canvas. Look, the hull's mostly there to keep the air in. Mars' atmosphere is so thin, you don't need a lot of streamlining. By the time the ship's going fast enough for air resistance to matter, it'll be high enough that there's practically no air.
You want to send him into space under a tarp?
Yes. Can I go on?
No. You think he means it like, are you kidding me? You know? Mm-hmm. Or like, are you kidding me?
I think it might be the second one.
Really?
Uh-huh.
Could be the first way. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, it could be the first way.
So what's your message to couples when talking about using email or text as communication?
Wow. Well, a lot of the times, like, my couples are high conflict usually when they come see me.
Mine
and
too.
Most of the time I have to tell them, cut it out. Like, just stop texting with each other. Even stop calling each other. I mean, many couples will call, and if somebody answers the phone and they don't do it in the tone that they want, that they expect, they go, oh my God, something's the matter. Oh my God, they're mad at me. And then they get into, well, what's going on? What's the matter? And they're having to defend themselves. It's like cut it out during the day. Like, use text messages for scheduling. Like, I picked up the kids. I'm heading to, pick up dinner, whatever. Mm-hmm. Use it for scheduling. Don't use it for conversing. I mean, and it amazes me, because for as much as, like, I'm definitely a texter, I prefer text messages, but I don't prefer conversations over text message. I'll do, like, you even know, like, we'll text and I do short little things, and I'll say, hey, whatever, and then I send an emoji, and I never write out the words all the way. I'm a shortcutter and everything else. But couples will write novels to each other, and it's like, what? But then I think, gosh, how much more impactful would that communication be if you sat face to face and even said those exact words to each other, but you could hear the tone, you could see the facial expression, you could hold somebody's hand while you're doing it, preferably their partner's hand.
Yeah.
But
hold your therapist's hand.
Call your therapist and hold their hand. A lot of times I have to tell them, like, this is not effective for you guys. Like, please make a pact with yourself that you're going to stop doing it. So if one person starts doing it, kind of remind them, hey, let's talk about it at home later. I'm going to go, but I definitely want to talk about this with you later.
Yeah.
And leave it at that. So it sounds like you go the same route, because I know we've talked about texting before too.
Yeah, if there's a relationship message or some conflict, you definitely shouldn't do it. Even though I feel like people really want to, and they do it more, I think, with email. They want to rely on email because they can get their whole point out. And I've had so many couples, they bring me stacks of emails from the partner. And it's like, look, first of all, I ain't reading all these. Second of all, I don't know that you should either, because what happens is they start to key on one word or one phrase, and then the other partner's going, look, I detailed everything, and you latched onto this one sentence and didn't even feel like you read the whole email. You pulled out the piece that you wanted to focus on that made me the bad guy, or that I was doing doing something wrong or didn't believe you. And you just don't get the same kind of interaction or response as when you're, like you said, sitting across from the other person, and you actually get to do what we teach couples probably all the time, which is just reflect. What did you hear him say? You heard they threw a lot of words your direction. What did you pick up about what's going on with them? Don't respond. Don't give your comeback. Just talk about what you heard them say.
Right. And also, and I was saying it as we're talking about it as, writing conversations to each, they're having conversations, but they're really not.
Yeah.
They're imposing and they're putting their partner on, here, you're on notice. These are the things I've been thinking about. These are the things that you have to read about, no matter how painful they are, no matter what frame of mind you're in, all that stuff. And it's just, boom, here it is. And they give it to you. And you have to sit there and take it all in. And you're right. You can get focused on these little tiny details, like even just one word out of an entire, couple of paragraphs can say, well, why would they say this?
Right.
And they get stuck, where when they're in person, you have the two-way communication. Hey, I'm confused by what you're saying there. Or, hey, is there a different way you could say that? Like, is this what you really mean? This is what I'm hearing you say. Is this what you really mean? So texting, emails, think that emails were designed for business purposes way back when.
Back in the day, college,
way back when. And I think it's best left for business details.
Mm-hmm. I would say if there's one thing that will help any relationship is to be able to just say your piece and have the other person reflect it back, and then they get their chance to say their piece. I mean, there's almost no problem that you couldn't get through, even if it's going to be, look, you've heard me, I've heard you. We both understand that the other one understands our perspective. Now we can go on. We don't even have to agree. We can just let someone know. And that's what happens with arguments. You start cutting each other off. You start talking louder because guess what? They're not getting what you're saying. So you must need to say it again more loudly and more enthusiastically so that you know that they get it. And if you just knew that they got it, it would relieve a lot of the tension of the conflict.
Right. Well, Courtney, I'm hearing you say that couples should just talk with each other and listen to each other, and even if they don't agree, they can validate each other's statement. They can say something like, hey, I hear what you're saying, and even though it's not my perception of what happened, I can see how it's your perception of what happened, being that that's your truth.
I feel so much better now. Thank you. You understand me. It is surprising, and how difficult it is to teach that when you're talking to couples, because it's so often that people will start to reflect and then say, but that's not really the way I think about it. But no. It's not your turn to talk about what your perception is. You're still reflecting. And it's so hard because people are so many times just waiting for their chance to say the comeback. It wasn't always. It wasn't February. It wasn't this. I didn't do that. That's not what I said. Let's look back at the text. It's like, whoa. Let's talk about reflecting and just hearing each other. So thanks for doing that for me, Doctor. I really feel a lot better. You really kind of get to what it is. When I went to this movie with my son, I left, and the thing I said on the way out out of the theater was, this movie was all about problem solving. And to me, if there's one skill I want to give my kids, it's problem solve. Maybe they have to define a problem differently, and their life will teach them those things. But if you can learn problem solving, you can do just about anything.
Oh, yeah, I think that's a great point to make, right? Problem solving, because you can't feel hopeless, or it'd be really difficult to feel hopeless if you felt like you had problem solving skills. I mean, so it helps with just even kind of keeping your mindset moving forward and looking at, okay, but how do we get out of this? Or how do I fix this? Or how do I resolve this problem? So yeah, I like that.
There has to be a better way. And here's how Mark encapsulates the whole thing. So here's how he talks to a class of students when he actually does get back to Earth. Spoiler alert, because if he just dies out there, it's not nearly as inspirational. So when he gets back, he answers some questions, and here's the way he categorizes his attitude about being on Mars.
The other question I get most frequently is, when I was up there, stranded by myself, did I think I was going to die? Yes, absolutely. And that's one you need to know going in, because it's going to happen to you. This is space. It does not cooperate. At some point, everything's going to go south on you. Everything's going to go south, and you're going to say, this is it. This is how I end. Now, you can either accept that, or you can get to work. That's all it is. You just begin. You do the math. You solve one problem, then you solve the next one, and then the next. And if you solve enough problems, you get to come home.
Yeah, so we're ending on a really nice, resilient note, after all the themes in this movie. So problem solving, as you said, it was mathematical for this one, but not all problems are. Well, I guess some people would say they are, but
yeah, some would say every
problem is mathematical, but
yeah.
there's always a formula to it. So problem solving, we talked about sarcasm, we talked about keeping secrets, isolation, depression, and then how to think positively about things. And then I think the overarching theme of this movie, as you said, problem solving, and I think also resiliency. Just always thinking that there's a better way, or always thinking that there's a way out is something that carries a person very far in life, no matter what happens to them.
Yeah, no matter how down you are, no matter what your situation is, you have to be able to problem solve it. Maybe you can't get to where you were wanting to get to, but you may have to pick a new destination and say, all right, well, given these new set of circumstances, I have to adjust it. So we gave ourselves a very difficult movie as far as audio clips and the rest of it, but there were some really good themes, and I always like it when movies can teach us a little bit about ourselves and give us some insight into human relationships and tenacity and perseverance and resiliency, like you say. And I think this one did its job, and we were able to pull some of the psych out of the film and bring it here to Shrink to Shrink.
So that's going to end us for today, but we do this once a month, and this episode comes out at the end of May. We're going to do another one for June. So look for us on the last day of the month. We'll be posting a new episode on iTunes. And where we have Libsyn, is that where we're situated?
Yep.
And you can also find us together on Twitter at Shrink to Shrink, and that's with the number 2. You can find us separately on our own podcasts in between, and I host Coaching Through Chaos, and that's a self-help educational podcast bringing authors, experts, and people with resilient stories designed to inspire, motivate, empower my audience. And Courtney, you are the host of the Quadcast, where you and your best bud talk about life.
Swanee, yeah, we're observational humorist, kind of, maybe storytelling, comedy storytelling podcast, and we just talk about our lives and some of the psychological things, but some of just the goofy, silly things that happen with us and our families and the mistakes that we make, and kind of poking fun at ourselves. So you can get me there at QuadfatherMFT. And I saw that you had didn't you just post a new episode, or were you just publicizing a new episode? Yeah,
I did. We're back on every 2 weeks. We had a little delay in production for a little while, a little blip, and we're back on it every 2 weeks. Launch of an episode. So our current episode is out now. So it's coachingthroughchaos.com, and of course you can find us on iTunes, Coaching Through Chaos. And we've got lots of fun, lots of informative, and some of them are fun episodes. Yeah. I have a good time with it because I just want people to be able to have a resource for their own problem solving. If I can help people learn how to decipher their own lives a little bit better, that's my goal with that. And so, yes, Coaching Through Chaos, Quadcast podcast, and together we're Shrink to Shrink.
And so, do you take a check, or can I use a credit card? How do I pay you for this service that you're providing for me?
I even take health savings accounts. So
all right.
Just give me your number, and I'm happy to swipe.
All right, we'll work it out. So maybe I'll get on your calendar for the end of June, and then we'll have a new podcast the last day of June, and like we will for the rest of the months. So
yeah, and if anybody's listening wants to shout out and let us know on Twitter what movies they might want to hear us talk about, that'd be great too.
Yeah, and just call me, because it's much better than texting. So just
his number's plastered on Twitter.
Yeah, we'll just give me a ring. We'll work it out. So until next time, we'll see you at Shrink to Shrink.
So long.